Hello everyone in Punta Tech. My name is Kfir Damari. I'm from Israel and I'm going to share with you how I founded SpaceIL and also Bereshit, the first Israeli spacecraft that ever reached the moon. And I'm going to tell you how we took this crazy idea and made it into a reality. But before we start, I want to share with you that my background actually doesn't come from space. It comes from cybersecurity. I started programming at the age of 6, and then I went to the Israeli intelligence forces in the army, and later on did my bachelor and master degree in communication system engineering and founded a few startups in the field of cybersecurity. And I actually entered this field of space through founding SpaceIL and through this amazing venture. And it's actually started when a friend of mine called Yariv wrote on Facebook that he want to open the Israeli team competing in the Google Lunar X Prize competition. And when I saw that post, I immediately answered, if you're serious, I'm in. And this is how we started. We started, the three of us. I said I'm a communication system engineer, Yariv is an electronic engineer, and Jonathan was our space engineer. And we actually started by sitting in a bar in the city of Hulon in Israel, and over a few beers started designing this concept of that spacecraft. And I will share with you that we planned a really small spacecraft. You can see here those pages that we drew at that date. On the bottom page you can see a timeline. We're planning to do that by Q4 2012. And you can see the calculations that calculated how much fuel do we need in order to get to the moon. Now, when I'm saying that we plan to do it small, I mean really small, okay? We plan to use the technology called CubeSat technology that allows you to build really small satellites. And we're planning to take the 3U version, which is 10 on 10 on 30 centimeters, again, size of a bottle, and add landing capabilities and take it all the way to the moon and land there. But the problem was that when we started to do the actual engineering, the smallest fuel tanks that we were able to find were bigger and heavier from that whole design. So eventually we were not able to build it that small, and we had to move from 1 fuel tank to 2 fuel tanks to 4 fuel tanks to bigger 4 fuel tanks. And it took us 5 years to get to the sketch design that can actually get to the moon, 2 more years to get to the point that we actually have something concrete, and 2 more years to get to the point that we can actually launch it. So it was a long process, but eventually we got to the point that we knew how the spacecraft is going to look like. And it was much bigger and much heavier than that we planned. But we didn't need it just to have a spacecraft. We also needed to have the team. You can see here 100 people. Half of them are working in SpaceIL, and the other half, those you cannot see their faces that are standing the other way, are working in the Israeli aerospace industries, our partners. And really, we needed so many amazing people, so many talented people. We had 14 different types of engineering. Everyone I think about mechanical design or software or electronics. But I always like to mention the thermal engineering, because when we're in space, we have temperatures that goes from minus 180 degrees Celsius to plus 180 degrees Celsius. That means really cold and really hot, and we need to make sure that each and every subcomponent of the spacecraft will be able to sustain that 1.5 months journey. So it's not easy, because we need to think about it in advance and make sure that it won't be too cold or too hot. But that's just one aspect of the mission. So we needed amazing people, but we also needed amazing partners. And we were lucky to get, as I mentioned, the Israeli Space Agency, the Israeli Aerospace Industries, but also the Israeli Space Agency, and our donors starting from Maurice Kahn and the Edelson family and many others that joined in and allow us to get to the point that we have a working spacecraft that is ready for the launch. And if I mentioned the donors, I should mention that when we started, the prize of $20 million sounded a lot, but eventually the cost of the spacecraft became $100 million. And one of the problem was that as the spacecraft became bigger, the budget became bigger. So it started with an $8 million budget, but every time we had to go back to those donors, to those people who gave us money, and tell them, look, we were sure it will cost us in the beginning 8, and then 20, and then 40, and then 60, and then 80. But we were wrong, and we need more money to make that happen. And I think that part was really, really challenging, besides just designing the spacecraft, but also being able to get all those people to help us to get the money so we can actually make this crazy idea into a reality. But with their help, with the big donors and the small donors and everyone that joined in, we were able to make it happen and get to the point that we can eventually pack the spacecraft and take it to the airport. And the name of this plane, by the way, that took the spacecraft to Cape Canaveral was Challenge Accepted, which I think is also a really, really good name. And we were able to actually start our journey. And we did that together with SpaceX that launched the spacecraft into space. Now, you need to realize that we didn't launch it by itself. We didn't buy the whole launch. We actually hitchhiked on another big communication satellite. For us, it was an Indonesian satellite that took us with him. There was also a small US satellite in between. And we were able to get to the launch. And this is, by the way, our rocket, and you can see that it's not that clean on the bottom. This is because it's not its first launch. I think it was the third launch for this rocket, part of SpaceX amazing technology that they can land the rockets and then launch with them again. But SpaceX did an amazing work, and they were able to take us into space and allowed us to start our journey. But I will also share with you that this launch event in Florida was also an amazing moment for me, because when we started in 2010, I wasn't married, I didn't have any kids. I did not imagine that I will get to this moment with a 5-year-old kid and a 2-year-old girl. So it was really also an amazing moment for me and for the family. And we started this journey to the moon, and we were thinking about how we can connect the people in Israel and around the world to this journey, to show them how the spacecraft is getting farther and farther from Earth and getting closer to the moon. And this is one of the pictures we took, and we took a few of them with the spacecraft, with Earth in the background, and the sentence here that the first time we showed that small country with big dreams. And we took a lot of pictures and actually showed how the spacecraft is getting farther from Earth, to get all those people involved and get them engaged and allow them to be part in this journey. Now, the journey from Earth to the moon wasn't easy, because after we started on February 22, and in that day we started to have problems. And one of the problems we had was with the star trackers. The star trackers are actually part of our navigation system. It's basically a camera that takes a picture of the stars, compared it to internal maps, and tells us where we are. But it seems that during the launch there was some kind of dust or something, we don't know exactly, that actually came and made them malfunction or not work as expected, let's say. And we had to redesign our orbits, our journey, the path that we're planning to take, and the way we're planning to use the different sensors. We had to redesign it to make sure it can work with that problem. And that wasn't the only problem. We had computer resets, which is normal in space, but we had more than expected, and we had many other problems. And the team had to work day and night to get to the point that on April 4th we actually were able to get to the moon, and we were actually able to capture the moon. And this is the first picture that the spacecraft took of the moon from a close by, and we were all excited. And there were a few other amazing pictures. This is one of my favorites. This is the far side of the moon, and you can see on the back there's a white thing there. And if you haven't realized, that's actually us, that's actually Earth. That gives you a perspective about our place in the universe. And on April 4th, when we captured the moon, we actually made history. We made Israel the 7th country in the world to achieve that. We made it later on the 4th country in the world to try to land on the moon. And we became the first private organization in history to make it happen. Now, a week later, after we orbited the moon for a week, we started the landing process. And when we started the landing process, everything looked good, just as expected, and we believe that everything is going to be smooth. But then, after everything was good,
so we are in the braking process. The braking process is working well. We can see the spacecraft slowing down. You can see the velocity as we are slowing down, and the spacecraft is doing exactly what it's supposed to do right now.
But after that, and after we got some amazing picture, including this picture, what we call it, the selfie picture of the spacecraft with the moon. After that, there started to be some problems. We had a problem with one of the hardware components, the subcomponents, that led to actually a series of problems that connected with misinformation in the team. There was one part of the team that knew something that the mission commander didn't know from a previous test we did. There was an architecture problems that connected to that issue, and actually from those three different things that combined, eventually the computer shut down and they reset itself, and it shut down the engine, and by the time that the engine came back, it was already too late. We did manage to get another picture, which is this picture, but that's it. We got to the moon, but we got in a much higher speed than expected, around 1 kilometer per second. And this is a picture that actually NASA took a few days later. And you can see from that picture that we got to the moon, and we definitely made an impact, but it wasn't just as we expected. Yet we did made history, and we got amazing responses from people in NASA and from ESA and really all over the world. And we got amazing responses from people in Israel. We got one of the highest honors in Israel, which is lighting the torch in Israel Independence Day. But I think for us, all along this journey, there was one thing that we had in our mind, and that's that the kids that will see this moment will say, wow, there's also not just wow, Israel was able to do that, but wow, there's also a lot of science and technology behind it. And also that they will realize it's also about creativity and resilience and teamwork and dreams and passions and many obstacles that you need to overcome through the process. And in order to make that happen, we had hundreds of volunteers that went into classroom. We've met more than 2 million kids and inspired them and showed them that it's rocket science, but this is something they can understand, even if in their kindergarten and of course if they are older. And what we try to create is what we previously called recreating the Apollo effect, but now we call it the Bereshit effect. And that was again to inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers. And I'm really happy and really proud to get all those responses and to get stories of kids that were inspired and went to actually study science and technology. And we really have so many responses like this. There's actually an academic research now that is being done to study this Bereshit effect and to see how other countries and other places in the world can do that also. And that connects us to what happened just a month ago when we announced that Bereshit is not the last spacecraft. There's going to be Bereshit 2, which is a new mission with 3 spacecrafts combined. There's going to be 2 landers that are going to land on the moon and 1 orbiter that will keep orbiting the moon, and we'll have both students, university students, but also high school students that will be able to connect to that orbiter and get information and conduct scientific research in deep space when they're already in high school. So this is something exciting. And what's also exciting, that it's not going to be just Israeli. We are actually going to open this mission to other countries from all around the world. We already have more than 7 countries that are interested and we're negotiating with. And it's not just about connecting in the science and the engineering. It's also about actually connecting the kids there to be part in the next mission, and that excites me personally. And to finalize this story, I want to tell you that we're talking about engineering and entrepreneurship and education and a lot of things, but for me, when we're talking about Space AL, we are actually talking about dreams. And when I saw this sentence in the first time, I decided to put it in all of my presentations. And nothing is impossible. The word itself says impossible, and that means 2 things. First of all, if you take something impossible and break it down a little is enough, somewhere between the M and the P there, you can realize it's possible. But the most important part is that the only way you can make something impossible possible is if you are going to do whatever is needed to make that happen. So I want to wish all of you that you will do whatever is needed to make your dreams come true. And really, to finalize my last slide, this is my family that was with me in the lunch, and if a second ago I wished all of you that you will do whatever is needed to make your dreams come true, I want to wish myself, but I believe all of us, that you will also dream about how to make the world better for the next generation. And with that, I will say thank you. Pleasure.